BraveWords Records, home for Alcatraz, Bangalore Choir, Crimson Glory, Jack Starr, Voices of Extreme, Paul Di'Anno's Warhorse, The Chris Slade Timeline, Rhett Forrester, Prophets of Addiction, Aska, and Lillian Axe. BraveWords Records, where music lives.
Please welcome to BraveWords Streaming for Vengeance, none other than Mr. Phil Collen from Manraze and a few other bands, I think.
Yeah, apparently, yes, there's a few out there.
You're in Germany now.
Back home. Back home, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. No, because I just flew in from Frankfurt. I was at the Summer Breeze Festival, and wow, it's the state of the business these days is just flourishing everywhere, and it's hotter than fuck everywhere too.
It is. Was it still hot in Germany?
It was really, really hot. Like it's
Wow.
yeah, and I fly back home to Toronto, and I think I brought the heat with me.
Jeez. Wow. Yeah, I'm in New York right now, and it's beautiful. It's actually hot. Yeah, so yeah, probably about the same.
No, and we don't need to talk about weather all because I'll never complain because I know my snowbanks are coming very quickly. Do you have much connection with Canada?
Love Canada. I mean, whenever I can and whenever we come up, we can. I absolutely adore it. So yeah, really, really good. I had some friends used to live on the West Coast, and I'd go up and stay with them and
Okay.
float around in a boat and stuff. But it was great. Yeah, very cool.
Well, lots to talk about. Manraze, the term super, when they say super group, I'm like, I following you forever, and I'm looking at the origins of Girl and the Pistols, everything, and I look into your eyes and going, I bet you these goals are still the same since you were just a little boy, a little, you know what I mean, in the music business.
They are, and you're still trying to, get the perfect song, get the right energy for it, and Manraze is great because it was an ongoing process, and we were getting better and better and better, and yeah, it was great putting this out because it's 5 CD, it's all of our, demos and the 2 albums, some live stuff, the whole thing. But I think we've got a lot more to offer still because there's I saw Paul and Simon recently. I was over in London, and just before Paul's 70th birthday, I went round his house. He lives walking distance from my place in London. So I went round there and saw him and his wife and his daughter, Holly, who's actually on one of the tracks. She does a duet with me, actually, on
Right.
closer to me. And it's saw them great. And yeah, he's busy, he's doing the pistol stuff. I've got Def Leppard stuff constantly. But yeah, I think we're going to be hopefully doing some gigs. Maybe this year, Manraze, probably in London if we get round to it,
Right.
And more new stuff. No, it's but yeah, it's the same kind of thing. You want to write the perfect song, record it, and have the right kind of vibe and energy to it. That's the thing.
Now, my father worked for Winchester decades ago, and I had to laugh at the title Lock, Stock, and Barrel.
Right. Yes. It's all in. So it's like, and it's a British term. It's like, it's lock, stock, and barrel. It's the whole gun. It's the whole enchilada, if you like,
But the famous Guy Ritchie film had 2 barrels.
It did. Lock, stock, and 2 smoking barrels, actually. Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
I know. I love that movie. It was very great and very London. Again, Manraze is very London. I'm from East London. Paul's from West London, and Simon's from North London. So yeah, it's a very interesting thing there, dynamic.
So you have 10 years age on me, and looking at this, looking at the soon-to-be classic bands from the late 70s and the early 80s, it was quite interesting because they were a melting pot of all these different styles and genres, whether it be reggae. But I mean, it really was a big mixture. And maybe that's the biggest influence on Manraze. You're kind of taking that, doing that again, decades later.
I think so. You can't always get away with. You can't. I love the Clash, the Police, the Pistols, and this was kind of like an amalgamation. You could have all of that with a little bit more sophistication than some of those bands, but I think without losing the edge and the energy. So that was the thing, that was the excitement, and obviously it's got a rock thing to it as well. It was like bands like Iggy and the Stooges, New York Dolls, and later on, the Guns N' Roses, early Guns N' Roses had a bit of that as well. Considering they were American. But yeah, no, this is it's very British, and it kind of it dips in and taps into all of that. So yeah, very, very exciting stuff.
Did you ever like cross paths with some of these people that some of these icons and idols from yesteryear that actually did that and kind of pick their brain? Did you pick Sting's brain or did you pick like Topper Headon's brain or you know what I mean? Like did any of that conversation come up with those bands ever?
Yeah, obviously with Paul, because you know I see Paul all the time. I mean, I've done. I would fanboy out when we first got Manraze together. I'd be like, wow, you know, and what was the thing? And it would be like, well, him and Jonesy had played together for so long, and they kind of, it was like the White Stripes. It was just the two of them. You know, they'd be just playing all this great stuff, and yeah, obviously when they got Glenn in, that changed the dynamic, and then Johnny singing over the top of it. It was like very unique, and there was the whole fashion thing incorporated. But yeah, I do. I pick Brian May's brain. I've done it a few times, and I'm like, what was that like? You know, it was so creative. There was so much going on. And what did it? And I think what they did, they certainly allowed each other to flourish. I think there was a very high intellect, say in Queen, for example, and you know, letting Freddie, you know, who'd been a bit guarded. You know, he was a gay Indian man singing rock and roll. And he wanted to incorporate opera and theater and all this stuff. And these guys were like, they just kind of pushed him to do that. They kind of pushed him forward. And then all of a sudden you've got this amazing stuff coming up. And I think that if there'd have been different people, that wouldn't have happened. You know, they allowed him to be himself and some, you know, and I'm sure when they first heard Bohemian Rhapsody, they were like, well, I know the record company said this is career suicide, but with them, they were just really smart and they wanted to see what would happen. And that was really interesting. Because of that, the whole thing just flourished and got enhanced, and it was like, whoa. So certainly with that stuff is you allow it to kind of to peak and keep going. And I think that's the problem that happens with a lot of bands. There's an ego thing, or it stops the flow. Some of the great stuff, you know, obviously the Beatles and, you know, the Who, all of that stuff, you know, you had Pete Townsend writing all this stuff and there was no real restriction. And I think that's the thing, you know, that allows this great music to happen. And unfortunately, now and again, you get egos and people start falling out with each other, and that kind of stops that flow. But long-winded thing to say, yes, we feel a bit like that in Manraze. We're not a huge band, but we're allowed to just go off on tangents and you know, and follow it to the nth degree. And I that's a really kind of inspiring place to be for a songwriter, you know, singer, guitar player, whatever you want to call it, any one of us, you know.
Now you must have been about 20 years old when Nevermind the Bullocks came out.
Yeah. I'm like, well, I'm 2 years younger than Paul, so yeah, around that time for sure.
And do you have memories
Oh yeah,
of the world exploding or whatever?
yeah, I do. I think so. What happened in England, in London especially, there was a strike, and there was a trash strike. So everything's piling up, and you know the music scene had got really boring and dried up, and you know our favorite bands they'd be doing like 20-minute songs, Led Zeppelin or Deep Purple, and it'd be like it was like, oh, it was just a bit tiresome. And then I remember hearing that for the first time, you know, God Save the Queen, which is my ringtone. And I was like, oh my God, finally, this is what it's about. It's like the way that Paul was hitting the drums, the nastiness of it. Jonesy's guitar playing was amazing. It was like just this sound and this force, and just the whole thing was like, yeah, incredible. So it kind of it changed my life. It was like I want to incorporate that because that's how a rock band should sound.
How do you walk in a room and put together a project with someone that actually lived through that and could probably tell you stories until you die about what happened and if he can remember, you know what I mean? Like what
He does remember, and I often press him about it. I'm like, well, what happened when he said, well, we used to get beat up. We done this thing on TV, and you know, Jonesy swore, and then we'd be out in the street and people would attack us for being this loud, aggressive thing. And they were just calling out what was happening, which was very interesting. But the music sounded that way, and I thought it was fantastic. And I do ask Paul about a lot of that time, and yeah, it's fascinating.
Now, how does Manraze actually help with your focus with Def Leppard? Because you have
I
more
think,
freedom, and then
yeah,
sorry, go ahead.
I think there's certain things you can't do in Def Leppard. Like we could never do a reggae song. We wouldn't even try it. It'd be like embarrassing. My favorite band of all time is The Police. So they'd do kind of Sly and Robbie style reggae. And I was like, oh my God, like real Jamaican reggae, but put a spin on it. And, obviously the Clash used to do that occasionally. And it didn't sound fake. It actually sounded cool. It was like using the influence. And so that's why they would get away with it. But then Sting would write these just fantastic songs. And Stuart Copeland and Andy Summers would just geniuses at their art. They would just be playing. Stuart would fill in the drum, kind of a bit like Mitch Mitchell. It kind of just flowed, fill all the gaps in, put delays on it. And Sting was a great bass player, obviously a brilliant singer, and the songs were incredible. And Andy Summers, to this day, another one of my favorite guitar sounds. Walking on the Moon, I'm like, wow, I want that sound. And so all of these things combined, and I think with Manraze, you can go off the deep end. I mean, we're doing it more with Def Leppard. We're getting very diverse in our the directions that we're going in, and I think it's really exciting. But even with that, there's some things you can't do, and I think with Manraze you actually could. You could mention all those bands that I just mentioned. You could say the Pistols. You could say, the Police and all that, and you can actually combine it. So it's pretty cool.
Tell me about your riff creations and storage, and it goes on this pile. It's say for this band, and how does that work out, or does
No,
it just
never does. It just comes out, and that they could be lyrics. They could be a poem. It could be a line or a phrase, or it could be a riff, a bass riff, a drum pattern. And before my phone's got all of this stuff on it. It's shit for days. Just me, just ideas, humming stuff, playing guitar, lyrics, whole lyrics that you go okay, and it's pretty much writes the song on the get go. But yeah, I never do. It kind of just comes out, and I allow it to, and it finds its way. It finds some stuff's kind of a bit too wonky, and it kind of, I haven't found a place for them yet. But I like the idea of it, and I think that they will eventually. There's so many of them. It's great.
Now you're talking about Manraze playing live, and were there gigs in your past, like even with Def Leppard, like where you thought, wow, maybe we could be an international band? Like, like you go from that one little special club gig and look at each other and go, we might have something here.
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely. We done an Alice Cooper tour, and we opened up for Alice, and it was a theatre tour of England, and we're like, this is great. This is really great, and it's just finding your audience. It's like you put it out there, and loads of people have never heard of it, and they go, well, it's too diverse, and it's like, well, that's the point. That's what we want to do, and so we'll see. I mean, still, it's like it's really cool. And these songs, if one of them or two of them or whatever finds a home somewhere, and it inspires something else, great. That's what we'd love.
Do you have a moment for a couple of quick Def Leppard?
Sure.
Now, I came in at High and Dry, and it really changed my world, changed my life. And like, were you paying attention for those first two records? Were you a fan that was like, wow, what is this band?
Absolutely. Well, I was in this band called Girl, and they were contemporaries. Def Leppard were contemporaries. That they had funny accents because they come from up north. We're from London. And my band Girl was from London. They kind of speak like me, and Joe and that speak like from Yorkshire. So it's got a different kind of timbre to it. But other than that, I loved what they were doing. They were doing something unique that other rock bands weren't doing, and it kind of had harmonies, melodies, guitar parts that were thought out, like a little bit like a Thin Lizzy, but it actually had a bit more commerciality to it, and it was more hard rock in the same token. So it was like, well, this is really cool. Second album come out, and I thought, wow, this is amazing. High and Dry. However, it kind of reminded me of AC/DC, and I thought this is still going somewhere. And I'd met the guys. We jammed on stage. I'd stayed at Joe's house when I was in Girl, and him and Steve used to come down to my mum's house in East London. When they come down to London, they'd sleep on the couch. So we knew each other, and Joe had called me, he said, do you think you could learn 16 songs in 2 days? And I said, yeah. He said, because Pete Willis is not having such a good time. There's some drinking things going on. Anyway, smoothed out, and he said, he's okay now, so it's fine. A year later, I get a call, and it's like, you want to come down to the studio and just help us out on this album? I'm like, yeah, play some solos and da-da-da-da. Come down, played some solos, met Martin, all that, and played some more solos. He found out I could sing. I'm singing all the backing vocals and everything. Play more guitars, more solos, more vibes and all this. We released the album, and it's like Pyromania, and it's like, and it just blew up, and that was it. And then none of us went home again. We was all living with our mums, if I'm not mistaken. And that came out, and we were gone for a year. We were out on tour, and it just blew up and grew and grew and grew. You know, MTV, all of these things, and so we didn't really see that coming. And it was just a very natural progression, you know.
Now, and no disrespect to you, no songwriting credits on Pyromania.
They were all done. Everything was written when I got there. It was just like all these blank spaces, fill in these blanks. You know, it's like, you know, Stage Fright, Photograph, Rock of Age, all the solos, all backing vocals, adding to all the backing vocals, and Rock to Your Drop. You know, just go and go wild. Just play some solos, play guitar licks, and all of this stuff. And so it was a guitar player's dream. You know, you didn't have to do all the heavy lifting of like rhythm guitar and writing the song. You could just come in and just like play over the top of these amazingly crafted songs.
Now, I've ran BraveWords since the early 90s, and I don't think I've ever spoke to a band that has like two back-to-back biggest selling out. Like it really, there's big records, and then there's Def Leppard that have sold two of them back to back. That's crazy.
It is. I've actually got a disc, and it says, you know, when they were at 7 million, they're both those albums, you know, Hysteria went on to sell like 13 or 14 times platinum in the US. Obviously, it had gone diamond in Canada, but you know, Hysteria done that. But it says the first band in the history of the music industry to have two septuple albums back to back. Septuple platinum albums back to back. And I'm like, whoa, it's really cool. We're the first band in history. So it's bonkers when you see that kind of stuff, when you see it written down. It's like, yeah, very, very cool. You know, I think we weren't allowed for it to go to our heads because we had Mutt Lang, we had some grown-ups, mentioned Bernstein, were our managers, and they really protected all of them, you know, Mutt did, and kept us humble. And plus when everyone's out there touring, we're actually in the studio creating the next album. So it kind of, that kept you humble for sure, you know?
Now, if there was a stalling. I remember clearly because we were all waiting for Hysteria, and then Women came out. Classic, great song. Maybe not the most radio friendly right away. And I remember when it came out, I'm like, wow. And not that it was going to be a failure, but like it was like a little bit of a lull. And then
Anticlimax, yeah.
So tell me about that.
So that was Cliff Bernstein. He said, oh, you know, we got to lead with a rock song. But in England, they led with Animal. And that was our first top 10 single. It actually went top 10, and we're like, ooh, this is and that broke us in England. You know, it was like before that we were just like a theatre band, and all of a sudden we're doing arenas and all of that in England. And Hysteria was interesting because we'd spent so much money and time on it. It came out and it actually tanked because it hadn't made the money back from what it cost to record it. So, you know, after that, it kind of, Hysteria came out, Animal, Hysteria, yeah, there's a few of them. And then Pour Some Sugar on Me came out because it kept getting requested by the strippers in Florida at the strip joints. They would dance to it and then they would request it on the radio. So it became this really huge radio hit. And if I'm not mistaken, the same thing happened in Canada. It had a knock-on effect, like strip bars and girls going, yeah, we danced to this song, Pour Some Sugar on Me. And it kind of, that's how it started. It was a stripper anthem, if you like. And we actually got an adult film industry award for biggest stripper anthem in the world, or the most, requested or something, which is quite funny. But yeah.
So what is the one song fans actually, when they see you, it's like they talk to you about? Song or album?
Bit of both, really. It's and it varies, but Hysteria is the one because it sold so many, and it actually had. It's our best album. It's like, I even listen to it now. I'm like, wow. I remember where we were. I remember what we put into it. Mutt Lang, how instrumental, and how he pushed it and just made it happen and made it very different from everything else. I know that's really the one.
Who is your rock star? Who is your rock star?
Well, it's Jimi Hendrix. It's Mick Jagger. Love them. David Bowie. And yeah, that's it really. Yeah, my favorite band, like I said, is The Police. So it's but it's all of those people, for sure.
Do you remember the first time that you heard or saw yourself on the radio or TV?
Yeah, and it was in Girl. We done this TV show called Top of the Pops, and first time I heard me on the radio, it was a Girl track, and we're like, it always sounds different on the radio. It's actually really cool. You obviously get used to it, not being blasé, but it. I remember the first few times there was something so special about it, and so goosebumps and all of that stuff. It's great, and it sounds different on the radio. It kind of has a different dynamic to it,
Now, I was watching a Ringo Starr documentary about with the Beatles, and he said we really didn't know each other, but we had the same record collection. And I thought,
Right.
wow, that's a great question for someone like you.
So if you've got the same record collection, you know that person intimately, even if you've never met. When I joined the band, I discovered that me and Joe had the same record collection. As far as rock and pop went, I mean, I'm a really big soul, funk, love that stuff, and I'd go off into jazz. And Joe's only just gotten into jazz in the last 5 years, and he used to hate it, but he'll put Miles Davis on every week and listen to it. And it's interesting. We had identical. The Montrose album, the first Montrose album. There's like 3 people had it: my cousin Dave, me, and Joe, and we had it before anyone else. And when I met Joe, he's like, yeah, Rock Candy. It's like, yes, Bad Motor Scooter, all of these things. So, and that was the precursor of Van Halen. Obviously, it was like the same producer and same all of the thing. And obviously, Sammy ends up in Van Halen later on anyway. But yeah, so I think that you do know each other. Like Mick Jagger and Keith Richards met on a platform, a station in just outside London, and they're both got albums, and they're the same albums with a few differences. And so, dude, right?
Right. No, exactly. Well, what do you think about the vinyl craze, and what was your first vinyl purchase?
Motown Chartbusters Volume 5, I think. I also, so I'm in New York right now, and I've really gotten into Abbey Road half-speed mastered albums. They sound amazing, and it gets all the hiss out. Everything's clear and punchy. And I used to think this is all bollocks, and you can't tell different. No, it's dramatic. Anyway, I tried to get 3 albums. I went to 2 vinyl stores in Brooklyn, and it was like no one had what I want, and I wanted Erykah Badu Live, which is awesome. It's one of my favorite live albums. I wanted Prince, the Gold album, and what was the other one? There's another one. I've got a list, and on Avalon by Roxy Music on Abbey Road half speed vinyl. So yeah, these things are harder than I thought. I'm like, I thought, oh, they'll easy have it. And he said, wow, that's collectors have that. I said, really? I'm not like a vinyl head, but I kind of sound like I am, because I'm talking to this guy, and he's like, well, you can get this one for $500. I'm like, fuck, I'm not doing that. But yeah, anyway.
Well, you mentioned Abbey Road. Is there a particular studio, past and present, that you're thinking, wow, I wish we could have recorded there, or you wish you could record there? And person.
Well, we did. We recorded at Abbey Road, and we done the orchestra there, and that was great. And we always wanted to go to Polar Studios, at ABBA Studios. We recorded there, but really, I loved where we did Hysteria. You know, we did it in this place called in Hilversum, and the studio that we spent so much money. But some of the other albums that were done there, like, I mean, I'd done my solo in Animal in the same room that the Police did. What album was it? I think it was their third album. They'd recorded it in there, and Radar Love was recorded in that room, and you go, wow, by Golden Earring. So that kind of thing. As for, I would love to record with Ken Scott, who done all the Bowie stuff. Especially Hunky Dory's, Ziggy Stardust, Aladdin Sane, three of my favorite albums, and that would be great. You know, I know Ken Scott, and I, fanboy out like crazy. Me and Joe, we dashed it to Abbey Road, funny enough. He was working there, and he said, I said, can we come over? He said, yeah, I'm doing a project. And we went and met him, and we're just children, like asking him all this stuff. So yeah, Ken Scott would be great. Obviously Quincy Jones would have been great, and Mutt Lang is the best in the world, so love him. So whenever, yeah, that.
Last question, and you know where
Yeah.
I'm with this thing. Have you actually seen a band at the Sphere yet?
Everyone else has. I took my little boy Jackson to see The Wizard of Oz, and that night everyone went to the Eagles. They clear it out and open up. I haven't, but everyone else has.
So possibilities playing live.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you look. It's the Sphere featuring Metallica, the Sphere featuring the Eagles, so that you have to bear that in mind. We played Caesar's Palace, and it was Def Leppard at Caesar's Palace. That's the difference, and we have our own thing. So that's the only, you'd lose a bit of control with your production.
Now,
So
when you look at these iconic venues that are way, way older than you and I probably put together, and then there's Def Leppard right beside it, how does that make you feel?
amazing, Wrigley Field, Fenway Park,
Exactly.
both 115 years old. You go there and you're like, wow, it feels really good.
Thank you so much.
Pleasure. Thank you.